Welcome to this edition of McKnight's Live, where we speak to some of the top thought leaders in long-term care today. I'm Jim Berkland, Executive Editor of McKnight's Long-Term Care News, and I'm here with Linda Couch, Senior Vice President for Policy and Advocacy at LeadingAge. We're here at LeadingAge's annual convention on the floor in Nashville. And Linda, it's an exciting time, isn't it?
It is an exciting time. Our attendance is up significantly over year to year to year. The energy is great, and there's a lot going on in long-term care. So an exciting time indeed.
Okay, now let's jump into the elephant in the room, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The staffing mandate.
Yes.
In particular, the lawsuits that are going through. What can you tell us about where that is and your hopes for it, should I say?
Sure. So there are these three lawsuits, two of which have been combined. LeadingAge some months ago joined ACA's lawsuit, right? That was the first one. Subsequently, the state of Texas filed a suit in the same court against the lawsuit. Those were joined into one lawsuit. So those two lawsuits are effectively moving along together. And then, since our lawsuit was filed, State Attorney General and many LeadingAge state affiliate partners have filed their own lawsuit in a different district court.
And where's that attack plan going?
So where that's going is that the wheels of justice are churning, and the most recent event was that the plaintiffs, ACA, LeadingAge, and the other co-plaintiffs, filed a motion for judgment, based on the facts. The motion that was submitted by the Department of Justice, the lawyer for CMS in the case. And we expect, in our motion for judgment, we basically reiterated the brief that was filed when the lawsuit was originally delivered to the court, and that is that CMS overstepped its bounds, right? It went beyond its authority when it issued the staffing rule, and that the components of the staffing rule, the requirements in the staffing rule, are arbitrary and capricious, right? Okay. So right now we are awaiting a ruling by the judge, and it could be that my understanding is that it could be that the judge decides to make a ruling on his own. It could be that we go in for oral arguments in the case, but that we expect the next step, the next major point in the lawsuit to come in January.
Okay, next major inflection point, which brings me to a good segue here, because there's something else that's going to be happening in January.
Okay.
As we record this right now, we're just a week out from the presidential election.
Yes.
That's going to bring somebody new into the White House one way or another. What are LeadingAge's plans for working with the transition team?
Well, obviously, regardless of who wins in the presidential election, we will be meeting with the transition team, right? The White House transition team, and then the individual agency transition teams. And it's always, a matter of, figuring out now, which we're, doing at this moment, making sure we understand who those people are, who are they likely to be, so we can get in there and meet with the transition team. And when we meet with them, we can talk about how our angle in Congress is going to shift a little bit next year regarding the lawsuit advocacy and the staffing mandate advocacy. But broadly, with the transition team, whoever it may be, our broad thinking as our board finalizes our 2025 detailed policy platform is that we want to do three things broadly. Okay. We want the transition team to understand that regardless of where older adults live, they need a place that's of their choosing, that's safe, and has connections to the services they need. Two, we need the transition team to understand that the providers who serve those needs, whether it's providing the housing, any of those services, the providers need to be fully able to do that job.
Sure.
And third is that there has to be some coming to light of the facts, right? And the facts, as we understand them, and as hard as it might be able for one party or the other to separate themselves from where that party has been in the past, the facts tell us that the staffing mandate is unworkable, the math is off, we can't comply. We can't comply with the 24/7 RN requirement. So that's a fact that I think is indisputable from all the data. I think it's also clear that the next administration is going to have to come to terms with the fact that Medicare Advantage has been very negatively disruptive to our underlying Medicare funding. And what we don't want to see happen as a result of turning a blind eye or not paying enough attention to Medicare Advantage is a bleeding out of the Medicare Trust Fund. And so we think that we really have to have some hard discussions about the changes that have to come to Medicare Advantage so that we have a Medicare system that works for everybody.
Okay,
so those three things.
Definitely some work ahead, right?
A little bit of work ahead.
Okay, now getting back sort of to the staffing elephant in the room, if you will.
Okay.
Immigration reform, it seems, certainly from the provider point of view, and also a lot in Congress, seems that could be a big help, a big assistance if something changes. But it's pretty elusive. Do you have any hopes for that?
Hope for immigration reform, yes. And I say that we haven't had major immigration reform for decades, right? We haven't increased the visa caps for decades. We need those things to happen to really get at solutions that we need for the workforce. But we do have hope, and we've been obviously talking a lot about the workforce and immigration reform with members these past couple of days. And hope is the currency of advocates, right? That's what we deal with, and that's what brings us to work every day and to congressional meetings and visits with CMS, et cetera. And so we do hold out hope, and our hope is that the data that we compile, reports like the immigration imperative that we just did, bringing those recommendations, bringing the facts to members of Congress and policymakers will put us in a position that when that window opens, because there will eventually be a window when Congress and the administration are both ready to tackle immigration reform, that we have the wherewithal and the fighting power to get in that window and get the reforms that we need to bring the workforce that our country deserves to this country.
Great. Now you have an interesting background where you have a good vantage point for health and non-health providers. And what I'm wondering is, what are some of the positive or negative similarities between them, and how can we in long-term care, what can we learn about that for the state of care and services for older adults?
Well, one thing that strikes you when you spend a lot of time in affordable housing policy and then also in the healthcare programs that serve our nation's older adults is that you hear the word most vulnerable a lot. Most vulnerable served here. Most vulnerable, we serve the most vulnerable. We're proud of the fact that we serve the most vulnerable. And then the jab in the side is we serve the most vulnerable, but we're not getting what we need.
But it's always that word.
And so those things exist, I would say, equally on the nursing home side, right? Talk about underfunding. We all saw the recent ASPE report about Medicaid funding, right? It was a point in time looking at 2019 funding, so the world has changed a lot since then. But that report said nonprofit nursing homes were getting 76% of the cost of their services. And then they were expected to confront COVID, right? Housing providers are under the same sort of pressure, right? Public housing authorities are grossly underfunded, and housing programs in general don't have the resources they need by far to meet the need. And so there's this underfunding match. There's this alarm about serving them. We're so concerned about many of the needs of the most vulnerable, yet we under-resource them. I'd say there's also a lot of similarities in the survey process compared to the inspections process, and how do we measure quality? And we do so much in both the healthcare programs and in the housing programs to measure quality and understand where the good providers are and the bad providers are. But in each case, and we see this both on the nursing home side and hospice, et cetera, and on the affordable housing side, that CMS and HUD will have the data of where the worst providers are that cause the rest of us so much harm through all this underfunding, and yet they don't rectify those situations. We let bad providers go, and they create a toxicity through Congress that impacts the rest of the program's funding, which hurts the good providers.
Well, it seems, though, that affordable housing is everywhere in this election cycle. But are the proposals where they need to be?
The devil's in the details on this, and I would say, both presidential campaigns talk about affordable housing, which is fantastic. I would say Harris's campaign has more numbers in it about creating new units, expanding the low-income housing tax credit program. The Trump campaign proposal is much more about paving the way for new homes through decreased state and local regulations and zoning things that create a better pathway. But what we don't see in any of the proposals are, I guess, two things that we want to see more of a connection to. One is, who are you serving, right? It's not enough. We've seen through all the multifamily and housing production we have experienced in this country, the vast majority of it has been luxury. We don't need that from the federal government. We don't need a pathway to build more luxury housing from the federal government. Banks and home builders can do that on their own.
Right.
What we need from the federal government is that income targeting to get at the most vulnerable, to meet those needs, and then to make a connection, right, to the home care proposal that VP Harris has floated to the housing, right? Where are people going to live? And so they're kind of inching there, but from the older adult perspective, we need to see those details come out. And certainly we hope they do quickly after the election's over.
Whoever's winning.
Whoever wins.
Because again, a lot of times people don't understand is it's not like you can say, hey, this is our candidate. No matter what the issue.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
We don't care. There's a job to do for whoever wins.
Okay, great. Well, let's get back to our favorite theme again, workforce.
Okay.
Just so much been a consistent theme whenever you're talking about aging services providers. Have any successes been logged over the past years? What would you counter that? And what would be the biggest win, if you will,
the biggest
over
win.
the last
What's the
year,
biggest win? All right, so back to this notion that advocacy is a slow churn and we take the wins where we can get them. I would say we have had a win in the CNA lockout bill, moving out of 2 committees. It's moved out of 2 committees in 1 year. Who'd have thought? And so I think that's thanks to the advocacy of stakeholders and LeadingAge and other organizations. We right now are really doing a hard push to get that bill into an end of the year package. So that would be really wonderful to end the CNA lockout and get more CNAs trained like they need to be so they can get on the job. I think another light of hope is the Healthcare Workforce Resiliency Act. And this is this bill that acknowledges that immigration is a part of a solution. And it has a House bill, a Senate bill, lots of bipartisan co-sponsors. And that bill doesn't increase the number of visas, because that's a political hot potato right now. But what it does say is you've authorized 40,000 visas that are unused for whatever reason. Let's target those to healthcare workers and put them in use in our nation's healthcare system. So the fact that those bills, we've been able to increase support for those bills, I think is a big if, a big gain. But these are piecemeal things, and what we need are 100 other solutions, right? Because it's not one silver bullet, right? It's many, many things that are going to bring us to solutions.
Okay, and as we look ahead, what are you looking forward to most in the coming months, and as we head toward 2025?
So, as we head into 2025, as I said, our board is, will be considering our policy platform for next year and the direction. But I think as we get closer to the staffing mandate implementation dates for the 24/7, and as we get closer to those, we also want to help members of Congress get closer to the issue. So getting more members of Congress into nursing homes and into other provider types, because this staffing mandate is obviously not going to impact just nursing home providers, because if they're going to get that workforce, they're taking those workers from other providers. There's a lot of ripples here. And I do believe that many in Congress have never been in an aging services provider community or been in a community center, adult day center, in a PACE program. And so we need to really spread the wealth of the beauty of these programs to get people to understand that our nonprofit providers are doing all that they can, and they're providing jobs in their districts, in their states. These are important jobs. If a nursing home has to close because they can't meet the staffing requirements, you might be short 5 people from meeting the requirements, but you're going to lose 80 people because that nursing home is going to have to close. And so those are all kinds of ripple effects that we feel that we need to get closer to members of Congress by getting them closer to our communities.
All righty. Well, certainly some very, very important topics coming forward.
That's right.
And there you go, folks. Another outstanding McKnight's Live edition. I want to thank Linda Couch.
Thank you, Jim.
From LeadingAge. We'll see you next time.
All right.